This is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. We have had some requests for mermaid tutorials, so today we will look at a mermaid under the sea using the Guinevere stamp. This is an example of what we will do, although I have decided to change just a little bit on this. As you can see on this one, there's a little bit of shimmer, and what I did with this was the mermaid. I used some mica with a base for mica that turns it into a paint. I will show you that in just a few minutes, but let's go ahead and look at what we're going to do today with it. I'm actually just not going to use the mica because I think this has a soft look and I want to keep that soft look. So let's look at the supplies that we're going to use. We will start out by using a multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock. I have cut this one down to be 4 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches. We will then do a frame around our art piece. I'm using a kind of a creamy color today. This is going to be cut to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And then we will mount those onto our card base. So what I've done with this is I've taken an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, cut it in half, and then I've taken the half of that and folded it in half to make our card base. The stamps that we're going to use today is going to include Lavinia, Guinevere, the mermaid sitting on the rock, and that is LAV 445. We will use the Sea Creatures stamp. I'm going to use the jellyfish, and that one is LAV 170. We will use the Sea Bubbles, LAV 439. And I'm actually going to use the Spanish Moss. I like the flowy look to it. I'll actually end up using it upside down so it kind of looks like seaweed, but I wanted something a little bit more delicate than the seaweed stamp I've got. This one is LAV 505. And then our last little stamp that we will use will be the mini sea urchin, and this one is LAV 628. We are going to use 3 of our VersaFine Clair inks today. We're going to use Rainforest, Nocturne, and Warm Breezes. For our base inks, we're going to use Distress inks. We're going to use the Uncharted Mariner, Lucky Clover, Speckled Egg, Antique Linen, and Black Soot. We'll also go ahead and use a couple of the Tim Holtz watercolor pencils. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you can also just use your ink pads and use them. This is what we're going to do for coloring in the rocks. So I have the watercolor Vintage Photo and Mermaid Lagoon. We'll also use some liquid pearls for a little bit of accents. We'll use the Succulent, which is the light green color, and we will use the Gold Pearl. We're also going to use, for accents, some of our Sakura pens, the Jelly Roll pens. I've got the white, and I have got a glitter Jelly Roll pen that we're going to use. You'll also need to have a couple of paintbrushes, or just one paintbrush. It depends upon what size you want to use. We'll be using blending brushes and daubers today as well. Let's see, let's be sure and have some water on hand that you can spray and spritz, and some paper towels. And then to put our project together, I have just chosen to use a running tape, but you can also use another glue, such as the Ultra Bond adhesive or any other paper glue that you've got. And then you'll be using my stamping platform to do my stamping onto the actual card. All right, so now we can get started on our project. So as I mentioned earlier, when I did this example, I used mica on the mermaid, which I think looks really pretty. The reason I'm not going to do it for this particular one is that I really like the soft background, and I want to continue that for the one that I'm going to demonstrate today. But let me just kind of tell you how I did this. There is a product that I just got. It's the Sweet Poppy Mica Gum. And let's see, I don't know if I can get that to focus very well on that. Let's see if I can zoom it in so that you can see it. A little hard to see, but anyway, this is a liquid kind of it's almost like a glue consistency. But what you do with this is you take just a very teeny tiny amount, put it down on your surface, and then get just a little bit of your mica powder, lay that, mix that in with that little bit. I mean, you're literally talking 1/8 of a teaspoon is all you really need to make quite a bit of amount of the paint. And it doesn't take much, so you don't have to worry about wasting your mica powder. Like I said, with mine, what I did was I just mixed it up and then painted it on, and then I just added my little liquid pearl accents on top. I love the effect. It's a beautiful shimmery look to it. So that's an option that you can do on this particular project. And you can find the Sweet Poppy Mica Gum on the Bello Designs website. All right, so let's get started on our project. Let me zoom this back out just a little bit so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So we're going to take our piece of our cardstock that we're using for our art, which is the Multifarious Smooth and Supreme. And we are going to start out by taking our antique linen. So I'm going to take a brush, and I'm going to go ahead and do about 2/3 of it just covered with the antique linen. Start out with a very, very light coat. In the center, you're going to want to end up keeping it a little bit lighter than the rest of it. What we're trying to do is get the effect of the sun filtering down through the water. So we don't need this to be real, real thick and heavy. So now I've got a light base down, and I know you can't see it very well because it is very, very light. So what I'm going to do is keep this center part a little bit lighter. I'm not going to add any more color to it, but I am going to go ahead and add a little bit more toward the outside edges. We'll be putting more color over the top of that, but I want to kind of have the little bit of the base of the antique linen down. Okay, so I'll try and lift this up so you can see how it's lighter in the center. I don't know if we can get that. I've got blinds here. Let me close that off and see if that helps a little bit. But it is a little bit hard to see. But I have left the center to be just a little bit lighter shade of the antique linen. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our speckled egg, and we're basically just going to go right along the edge of where that sun looks like it's filtering in through the water, and just do a tiny little bit of shading with the speckled egg. So I'm just going to literally just kind of very, very lightly just go up and down. I'm using this little dauber so that I can kind of get more of that up and down effect. Again, I know it may be hard to see because these colors are light. And then I'm going to also take a little bit and just kind of go a little bit across below where I have the antique linen. Okay, so let's see if you can kind of see the effect there that we've got where we're just doing like a little stripe, very light little stripe. So then we will move on to our Lucky Clover. Same thing, I'll take just a little bit of the ink on the dauber and just make another little stripe right down the edge right there. This is a little bit darker color. And I'll do it on both sides. And maybe just a tiny little bit down here as well. Now, I know this kind of looks messy to start out with, but once we get all of our colors and everything blended in, it's actually going to look really neat. All right. And then we're going to move on to our final color, which is the Uncharted Mariner. With this, I'm going to go ahead and use a brush instead of a dauber because I do want this one to be a little bit more blendy, and I will actually be going over the colors, the other colors, just a little bit with it so it will blend in. And then I'm going to also blend it down at the bottom to finish out the color that we were working on creating with the blendings. Darken it up just a little bit. Now, sometimes I find that I get fingerprints when I start blending quite a bit. So I'm going to hold my card with another piece of paper to keep me from splotching up some of the ink there. Okay. Now that I've got that effect that I want there, I'm going to take what's left on the brush and just very, very lightly go ahead and go over the entire card, because I don't want to blend out the colors that we've already got, but I do want them to kind of go in together, softly going in together, so that we've got a really smooth blending. So your card's going to look something like this at this point. Again, you kind of look at it and think, huh, that's kind of strange looking, but it will really be pretty once we get all of our stamps on there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put just a tiny little bit more color down here on the bottom. And now we are ready to go on to the next step. So let me close up this one. So now we want to kind of have a little bit of that watery look. So I'm going to take my distress sprayer with my water in it and a piece of paper towel. And I am just going to do a quick spritz. I'm going to let it sit for just a second. And then I'm going to take my paper towel and dab up some of that water. And as you'll see, we kind of get that, just a little bit of the dots that take away the ink and give it a little bit more of an underwater feel. I don't like to do too big of spritzes on this particular project, just because I think the smaller ones look nice, because we're going to be putting actual bubbles on it with our stamp to get the bigger bubble look. But this just kind of gives it that little bit of more of a underwater feel without making great big huge water dots. The reason I use the distress inks is I like the way that it actually does a little bit better with the spritzing when you use the oxides, which you can still use. You just don't get as much of a vivid show when you do this particular technique, just because it's got the pigment ink in it. With the distress, it's just the dye ink, and so it comes off and leaves your white spots a little bit better. Okay, so now we are ready to go ahead and start doing some of our stamping. So I'm going to go ahead and get my stamping platform. I'm going to put my card down. And you can see I have got a sticky grid on my stamping platform. That way I don't have to use magnets. I like that a lot better. So we're going to start out with our mermaid. I also usually put a little piece of paper down underneath so that if it goes over, it's not going to get too many stamp inkings on my background, my sticky grid. So I'm going to place her right about there. And then we will close the lid and get our stamp on there. And then taking our VersaFine Clair Nocturne, we'll ink her up, and oh, looky what I did. I did not get her stuck down very well. So try that again. I'm going to go ahead and use, since I didn't get as much ink on there as I wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and add some more. I have discovered that when I've used my stamps a whole lot, if they end up not sticking, I just need to take them and wash them off. And that helps when I go back to use the stamping platform again. So I will need to remember to wash this particular stamp so she will stick much better to my door of my stamping platform here. Okay, let's make sure we get all of the surfaces touching the cardstock. There we go. There we go. Got a very nice little stamped image there. Okay, we will pull her off. In a few minutes, we will make sure that we clean our stamps off. I like to use baby wipes. Okay, so now let's go ahead and give her her urchin. So I will put the urchin where it looks like it's just sitting on top of her hand. All right. And same thing, using the black ink. then let's go ahead. I think at this point what I would like to do is color the rock before we layer anything on top of that. Now, what I'm going to do with coloring the rock is I am going to spritz some water down here on my work surface, just so that I've got a little bit of water. And then I'm going to take one of my brushes. And the way I like to use these is I get my brush a little bit wet, put some water on my brush, and then just pick up some of the color from the pencil. The reason I'm moving all around is that I want to have some spots lighter and some darker. So as I use the pencil, the ink that's on the pencil, it gets a little bit lighter. And then I also end up picking up just a little bit of these blues from the background. And I like that because then it just gives us some depth and a little bit of different color that mixes in. Again, hopefully helping us out with that look of being under the water. All right. Then I'm going to take just a little bit more on my paintbrush and just right around where the rocks show, I'm going to put a little bit of darker color, give it a little bit of a shadowing effect. So we've got some varying shades. And then what I like to do is I want it to have a little bit of shadow. So I'm actually going to take my black soot and just take my paintbrush. I'm going to wet it just a little bit so it's not too dark. And I'm going to just put a little bit of that black soot around her to give just a little bit of a shadowing effect there. And that's just a matter of just kind of blending it a little bit to look like we've got a little shadowing under her. And if you feel like using a little bit of that around the rocks areas to give them a little bit more shadowing, you can do that as well. There we go. So there are our rocks and that have been colored in using our colored pencil. So now we're ready to go on to our next stamping. So now let's go ahead and do our Spanish moss. And like I said, normally when you do it as a hanging Spanish moss, you would use it this direction, but I'm actually going to turn it around so that I can do a very feathery looking seaweed type thing. I'm going to use the Rainforest Green for this particular one. Well, my lid's stuck. There we go. All right. So I'm going to get another little piece of paper here because we will probably come off the edge just a little bit for my very first one. So I'm just going to lay that down. And we will start stamping in our seaweed effect. Got a little bit of ink on my door, so I'm going to wipe that off. I don't want to transfer that over onto our card. Alright. And then we'll just keep moving it around to add that delicate seaweed look. I actually think I'm going to use that one just as a second generation. We have a little bit lighter one. And let's put one down here. And we'll do one more right about here. Okay, let's have one coming up right about here in front of her. And I like that one, so I'm not going to add more ink on that one for the second generation look. Let's see, let's do one that's a little bit higher up, taller one. And maybe one coming in from the side. And we'll do a teeny small one right down here. Maybe right about there. All right. I might put a tiny one also right here just to fill in just a little bit. And I may do see if that we've got enough ink to do a second generation on that one. There we go. All right. So now we've got our seaweed in there. So let's go ahead and do our jellyfish. And I think I want the jellyfish just kind of up here in this corner. We'll do that in the black. So I'm going to put my green away. Ink him up. And I always seem to get just a little bit of ink on the bottom of this stamp because those little tentacles are so fine and thin that when you're trying to ink up your pad, it does flow over a little on the edges. So I'm going to do this very delicately. Ah, looks good. All right. So now we've got our jellyfish in there. We're going to put our black ink aside, and our final stamping is going to be with our bubbles, and we're going to want to do those in the Warm Breeze. So let's put a few bubbles coming up right around here. And again, ink up our stamp. And let's put some right across here. Okay, and then what I want to do, I only want just a few little bubbles right above her. So I'm going to move, let's see which ones I want. So I'm going to cover up the part that I don't want the bubbles to show up on. And that one, actually, I like that second generation there. And then I'm going to put just a few. Let's see. Maybe we'll just put these. And make sure I don't get it at the top either. We'll just put these tiny little bubbles right there. There we go. All right. So now we've got some bubbles in there that we want to not be too dark, so that's why I did it in the blue instead of a black. All right, so since we're done with our stamping, we're going to go ahead and remove this from the platform. Set our platform aside. And as you can see now, we've got that very sweet, flowy kind of look to the underwater scene. Now with our bubbles, we want to go ahead and give them some accent. What I'm going to do, I'm now going to take the Blue Lagoon, where is it, or Mermaid Lagoon, watercolor pencil. And again, you can do it with your ink if you want to. I'm going to take my paintbrush, I'm going to grab the other one, so I don't mix up the colors. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to get it wet in the water that I've sprayed over to the side. And again, just grab a little bit of color from the pencil. And then I'm just going to do some little accents. I'm not going to color in the bubbles completely with the blue. And it's very light, so it may be a little hard for you to see. I'll try and lift it up here in just a moment. And I'm just going to add some blue accents to some of our bubbles here. Just want to give them that a little bit of dimension. Go ahead and spritz a little more water on my surface so I can get my brush a little wetter. And like I said, I'm not filling in the entire bubble. I'm just kind of hitting some spots to make it have a little bit of dimension there. We're going to accent them a little bit more here in just a moment. Alright, so I don't know if you can see there, I've got just a tiny little bit of the blue. I think when I take the picture and post it at the end of this video, you'll be able to see it just a little bit better. Now we're going to take our white pen and we're just going to put some quick little lines in to give the bubbles a little more accent. The white doesn't show up quite as much where the sunshine is coming through on the picture, but you can see it a little bit more when we do it on the blue, where the blue is. Alright. So again, it's kind of hard to see, but I've just put in a little bit of those little white bubble accents. And then to finish off the accenting, I'm going to go ahead and take my glitter pen. And we'll just kind of add a little bit of glittery around the edges. And the thing I really hate about trying to do demonstrations with these beautiful glitters and stuff is that the cameras sometimes just don't pick up how really pretty the accents make it look when you see the card in reality. But I'll see if we can't maybe get an angle that will show some of the glitter. And some of the smaller bubbles, if you want to, you can even go ahead and color them in solid with the glitter pen. It's just whatever you like to do. Alright, let's see if there's any way I can pick up a little bit of the glitters. It's just so hard to see, but it really, really looks pretty in person. Alright, now, I also like to put a little glitter on her hair. Just kind of follow the lines of the hair. Makes it look a little bit like it's got wet, sparkly dots on it. Little drops of water. There, hopefully you can kind of see how the glitter does on her hair like that. And then I'll do just a little bit on my jellyfish as well. Okay, so now we're down to our final little accent pieces that we're going to do, which will be our liquid pearls. And one of the reasons we wait to do our liquid pearls until last is because they take a little bit longer to dry. And actually what I may do, because we can do this after we put the card together, is I'm going to go ahead and put it together and then I'll do the accents. That way you can see and we don't have to delay in putting it together. So we'll just take our card and mount it onto our frame. There we go. I'll tell you one thing I do think I'd like to do. I do like to have just a little bit of shadow down here at the very bottom, because we're getting deeper into the ocean. So I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit of the black soot down there around the bottom. I'll try and cover up this edge so I don't get black soot on my frame. I'm just going to put a little bit of shadowing down at the very bottom. It gives the effect of getting deeper into the water. There we go. Alright, now let's mount it onto our card. Same process. And got that mounted on there. And now let's go in and do our liquid pearls. So on the Urchin, I'm going to use the gold pearl. And I'm not going to do a dot on every single dot that they have on here. I'm just going to do a little bit of accenting. Just tiny little gold dots. I'm just barely squeezing because I don't want to get great big huge dots. Just enough to kind of get those dots on there. Again, they're a little hard to see on the camera, but they just give it just a little bit of dimension and accent. And then the final step that we're going to do is take our green, it's called Succulent, and dot them on our mermaid. I'll do a little bit bigger dots on her than I did on the sea urchin. And there we go. So there is our lovely mermaid under the sea. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. I hope you enjoy trying this mermaid under the water seawater card. Remember to check out the DellBellosDesigns.com website for more tutorials on the design team page. Have a great day.